Drawing still lifes can be really fun. It's a great way to practice drawing things from observation, which means just drawing something by looking at it very carefully. For this project, because we're just learning, we're going to keep it very simple, and I'm hoping you'll just select 3 simple objects to put together to create your still life. It's nice if these objects are different from each other, and it's nice if they're different sizes because your work will be more interesting. After you've set up your still life and you're happy with your arrangement, the next step is to do some careful observing. So the things I want to ask are, what is the tallest object? And if I look carefully, I can see that the very tippy top of this paintbrush is actually a little taller than my paint bottle. So the answer to that question is my paintbrush. Another good question to ask is, what is in front and what is behind, or are there any overlaps? So again, if I look at this arrangement, my cup and my paint bottle are next to each other. They are not overlapping each other, but my cup is overlapping my paintbrush because my paintbrush is going inside of my cup and it's coming out of my cup. So when I do my drawing, I'm not going to include the bottom of my paintbrush because it's being covered up. The other thing I might want to look at is just what's the different sizes of these things. Like the cup is the shortest thing, but it's also the widest thing from the left to the right. So those are all good things to pay attention to when you're working on your drawing. Now I'm ready to start drawing. And as always, it's best to start with a pencil, and it's best to draw lightly when you're starting to work. That way you can make changes if you want to. The first thing I need to determine before I start drawing is, how do I want my paper arranged? When I look at my still life, one thing I can ask myself is my still life taller than it is wide? Or is it wider than it is tall? For my particular still life, it is taller than it is wide, meaning my paintbrush and cup would take up more of my space going this way than my cup to my paint bottle that I'm working with over here. So I'm going to want to work with that. I'm going to want to make sure that I've got my paper turned this tall way to make my still life fit the best way as possible. Now, I don't want to draw my still life teeny tiny in the middle of this paper and have all this empty space around it. I want to really practice drawing large here so that my still life takes up as much space on my paper as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly just draw the bottom of my paint bottle and my coffee cup so that I can use those lines to help me with the rest of my piece. Now I need to remember that my coffee cup is wider than my paint bottle. So as I'm drawing these, I'm drawing my 2 lines where the bottoms are going to be right next to each other, but I'm making my cup larger. You might also notice that I'm drawing with a slight curved line, and that's because the objects that I'm drawing are round. Now I'm going to lightly start drawing the sides of my paint bottle, going up onto my paper, just lightly, so that if I want to make changes, I can. And the paint bottle that I'm drawing is round. It's a cylinder. So I'm adding just this little oval onto the top to hopefully help it look like it is a round paint bottle. Then I'm noticing that it's got this cap on it. And luckily, because I drew lightly, I can erase away this little line right here before I finish drawing my cap of my paint bottle. I'm also noticing on that paint bottle that the cap has a little line that goes across it right here. And that's where the cap can flip open so that paint can actually come out. The way that I have my still life arranged, the label of my paint bottle is, I can see the edge of it here, but then it's wrapping around the back to where I can't see the other side. So I'm only going to draw a portion of my label. I'm observing my paint bottle carefully. Every time I want to add something to it, I'm looking first so I can decide how to best add that thing. My paint bottle has a little logo on it that's made up of these 2 circles. And then it has a word on the front that's chromacryl. Now I could write that, or maybe I want to just write a different word on the front of my project just for something more fun. Like maybe I want to write still life or something. I don't know. I think I'll just stick with what it actually says, which is chrome, and then it's running off. So I'm actually going to only end up with chroma, which kind of works because chroma is a way of saying color, and this paint is colorful. Now I'm already noticing that I need to move my coffee cup over a little bit from where I originally put my little line. So I've moved that over a little bit, and I'm adding my, let's see, if I look at the label of my paint bottle, I can see that the cup, the top of the cup comes up a little higher. I'm comparing my objects to each other. All right, so I've got my cup here, and my paintbrush is coming out of my cup, and it's leaning against my paint bottle. So I'm giving myself my little paintbrush. Right now, I'm not super worried about the details of my paintbrush. I just kind of want to get the shape itself, and I think I got that at a little bit of a weird angle, so I've got to fix that before I keep going. Make it a little bit, go at a little bit of a different angle. Fortunately, I drew lightly and with pencil so that I could make that change. Now, if I'm looking at this handle of this paintbrush, part of it is silver and part of it's blue. So I'm going to come on down my paintbrush and draw a line for where it switches from that blue handle to the silver. And then I'm also noticing that the blue part actually kind of curves out a little bit, and that's not something that I showed in my original line. So I'm just fixing that little part right there. And now that I've got the silver part of my paintbrush here, and I'm ready to add the bristles. Now this particular paintbrush is what's called a flat brush. So the bristles aren't rounded, they're flat. They've been kind of squished and flattened. So I'm gonna add just like a little rectangle shape, and it slightly is overlapping my bottle cap. I'm also noticing that on the handle there's a couple lines on that silver part where it just has a couple little like divisions of that space, and then it's got the kind of part where the paintbrush bristles have been flattened. All right, so now I've got my paintbrush, I have my coffee cup. I'm finishing adding the opening of my coffee cup, and I've drawn it so that it's going behind my paintbrush handle so that it looks like my paintbrush is actually stuck down into that cup. And the last thing I need to add is my handle of my cup. So I'm looking first at how that handle's attached. It comes off the side of the cup and then it attaches in down here. For the purposes of this project, I am not going to add the design that's on my coffee cup. I'm just going to have it be a plain cup because we're going to be adding things to this later. And I think if I add too much design to my coffee cup now, it's going to make things a little bit hard for me later in this project. All right, so I've added a handle on, I've got my paint bottle, I've got my cup, I've got my paintbrush. But you might be wondering, I don't know, maybe you haven't noticed this, but these three objects are actually just floating right now. They're not set on anything. I've not drawn anything for them to be set on. So I need to add a line to show that these things are on a table. Now, if I add that line going across right here at the very bottom of them, it actually will still look like they're floating. But if I come up here behind my objects and I add my line behind my pieces, it'll make it look like they're set down onto the ground. All right, so I've drawn my three objects. Hopefully you notice they're really filling up the paper. They're taking up a lot of space on this paper. They're not teeny tiny. It's gonna give me a lot of room for the next part where I'm designing these objects and making them look pretty cool.